Hello, friends, gamers, readers, and whoever else I can entice or trick into viewing this. Welcome today to today's discussion on artificial intelligence. And before I get too deep into that, I have a huge announcement. One of the biggest announcements of my life, and that is no joke or exaggeration. Not only is my book getting published, but we have released a free bit of flash fiction, a teaser, if you will. I've written a 4-part series of short stories, the first of which has already been released. The other 3 will be released once every 2 weeks from now until the book releases at the end of September. The link to the publisher's website, where you can read a bit of free science fiction, is going to be down in the description. Please go check it out. It's not long, and I'm very proud of it and the accomplishment it represents. Also, while you're here, a like or a comment on the video would help. We're struggling to deal with the YouTube algorithms, as the publisher and I are trying to spread word about the book, The Descendant. Now that I'm done with my shameless plug, back to today's topic. Artificial intelligence, or as it is sometimes known as machine intelligence. And normally I'd like to start a discussion by simply defining what the topic is so we can all start on the same page. But that's part of the difficulty with artificial intelligence, or as I will refer to it from here on out, AI. Defining AI isn't as easy as you would think. There's many different factions in the scientific community that have their own definitions. So in our deliberation over what AI actually is, I hope to be able to explain enough for it to make sense to all of us. Asking for a clear definition of what AI is like asking for a clear definition of what human is. It's hard to pin a single definition on human, just like it is with AI. We cannot define human with a specific physical description because not all humans are the same. Some people are 4'11", some are 5'11". Some have freckles, some don't. Some are as hairy as dogs, and others have no hair at all, nor can a human be defined as a specific type or level of intelligence. I, as a visual person, can remember hundreds of faces, and will remember the conversations I've had with other people, and what I learned from them, and the weird way they talked with their hands, or that their socks didn't match. But don't expect me to remember their names. I am terrible with names. I also like to think that I'm smart. I work on airplanes and aircraft simulators, and there have been lives at stake on the quality of my work that I do with my hands. But I'm also not good at math. I never made it past trig in college. Never even touched calculus. At the same time, I have a high school friend who's always had better grades than me. He was simultaneously my best friend and my nemesis. I was always trying to keep up my grades with his, but I never could. He took college calculus in high school. He had a full ride 4-year scholarship to the local University of Arizona, but he did a stupid thing, and sometime in his 3rd semester he gave up. He quit, dropped out of college, and relinquished his scholarship. Moved back in with his parents, and he still lives with them. Because the classes weren't challenging enough. He was bored, and now he sells auto parts. So, for being a really smart guy, I think that was a really dumb move. Give up a full ride scholarship to a major university? I digress. My point is, we are all different. No human is the same. We're all different definitions of human. There are as many different definitions of human as there are different people. Neither physical description or mental capacities or capabilities can be used as a single end-all definition. At the same time, there isn't really a one all-encompassing definition for AI. We can't just say smart robots, because robots imply a physical body, and some AI, in fact, I suspect most AI, would have no physical existence at all, and rather would just be a massive collection of ones and zeros. And even if they do have a physical body, when you say robot, sort of like the mech-related game I'm playing and you're watching in the background, most people assume some roughly humanoid form, to go with this robot connotation. But a robot may be more like your Roomba that vacuums the floor, or a smart car that drives autonomously, or a drone buzzing around in the sky. Who knows? It doesn't necessarily have a physical form that is similar to a human's. It's not necessarily a biped. I mean, the physical form that an AI is put in is limited only by human ingenuity at this point, and if AI becomes good enough, it may only be limited by computer ingenuity. So then we get into the intelligence part of the definition, and much like with humans, intelligence is a relative term, from the greatest of savants to the averagest of Joes, and AI can be just as, if not more varied, than we are as humans. So how do we define what artificial intelligence is? Take a photovoltaic cell, for example. It's a sensor that, depending on how it is wired, will do something when light is present or when light is taken away. It can close your blinds when the sun rises, or activate rope lights along the sides of your driveway after sunset, or any other light-related switching type of task that you can imagine. Pretty cool, right? Pretty smart, huh? Wrong. Not smart at all. It is a physical sensor. It has no software, no ones or zeros of any kind, further blurring the line between intelligence and not, because it is taking in information and performing an action based on that information. But there's no programming at all. It's not a computer. It is a chip, a piece of hardware, a photovoltaic cell. To try and clarify, I did some reading on the internet. I looked at several definitions, and the one I like the best is taken from Wikipedia. To quote, "A system's ability to correctly interpret external data, to learn from such data, to use those learnings to achieve specific goals and tasks through flexible adaptation." End quote. And, that sounds simple enough when you put it in those terms, I guess. But actually building an AI is not as easy as it is to define such a thing. In the 1990s, as scientists were working on building these things, it started with a simple string of algorithms. I can't talk. It started with a simple string of algorithms, creating deductive reasoning, and eventually got good enough that they could even work with incomplete information. But the more complex the problem, the longer it took to solve. And if the problem became too large, if there were too many variables and too many unknowns, the system would stop working as each layer of uncertainty compounded on top of the other layers. They were unable to hold a candle to a human's deductive and decision-making ability. They lacked intuition, and that was partly due to the lack of common-sense knowledge. The sheer number of little bits of information that humans know, that is down in our bones, is staggering. We all know that rain is cold, the sun will burn your skin, the falling rocks will hurt, don't walk behind a horse, don't pet strange dogs, don't step on nails. That kind of knowledge is what I'm talking about. The AI doesn't know that kind of stuff, nor do they learn it like we do. They have to be programmed with it, they have to be told it. There have been several attempts to program computers with the breadth of human cognitive knowledge. But because it was dealing with non-quantitative and symbolic logic, those attempts have been, thus far, unsuccessful. And that doesn't even begin to overcome the problems with language, since we as humans talk in English, or Spanish, or Russian, or French, or Japanese. There's tons of languages, and the AI operates in binary. Ones and zeros. It takes extra processing power from the computer, wherever the AI is contained, to interpret input from such sources like cameras and microphones. Converting analog to digital is its own battle, and we as humans have been running analog the entire time. We are born with eyes and ears. We grew up with it. It's much easier for us. We have instincts that don't require designated processing power to operate our eyes and ears and touch. And that, goes along with the language barrier. It's just so different and so alien to us and us to it that it either takes lots of extra power in order to convert from one to the other, or it's just impossible. Thus far, it's just some attempts at fancy computer programs that simulate thought and function, but they're just computers using deductive logic programs. They're not true intelligence because they still lack intuition, or the ability to make educated guesses. Even if they have gotten good enough to read our expressions from our faces and be able to tell our mood from the tone in our voice and respond accordingly to those human interactions and moods, they're not intelligent. They're just programmed. They can't handle something they don't recognize. If this computer's been programmed to recognize smiles and happy faces, it will perform those functions as long as you are smiling and happy. But if you stub your pinky toe on the corner of the nightstand and are frowning and cursing up a storm and hopping around on one foot, the computer hasn't been programmed for that. It will have no idea what to do or how to react. Who knows what it'll do? It might not do anything. Or it could do the wrong thing. And that's the difference between a smart robot and an artificial intelligence. There have been attempts to build analog brains. For example, the Johns Hopkins Beast. It was called the Beast from the 1950s. It was a functional machine that would wander the halls of the university and was intelligent enough to find and plug into wall outlets to recharge its batteries before it died. And it didn't even have a computer at all. It was instead a twisted mess of transistors and tubes, and in some metaphorical way was very similar to a human brain. And personally, I feel these types of machines, these types of cybernetics or artificial brains, are the best solution and the only way to get to artificial intelligence. If you want to approach true AI and not just increasingly smart robots. Something akin to cloning or growing a brain in a jar. But then again, that starts a different argument. It's a human brain. It would have a mind and a personality, right? Would it have votes? Would it have rights? Would it be allowed to vote? Would it have a gender if it's just a brain? How would you keep a literal brain in a jar alive? And how would you keep whatever poor soul is trapped inside that brain sane? That kind of gray area around the gray matter brings up more questions than it answers. And then there's also the problem of application. What is the job the AI is supposed to do? Because you're going to have very different AIs for different jobs. If you have an AI to drive a car, then it only needs a two-dimensional map. So therefore, you have no need for three-dimensional processing, right? You only need X and Y axes and not a Z axis. And, the possible applications of AI are limitless. Drive a car, yes. Fly a plane, dive a submarine, diagnose injuries, perform surgery, predict economic trends, be your house's watchdog, remind you when you forgot your keys on the counter or left the back door unlocked. How much freedom do we give these AI? What liberties do they take? Where does our privacy end? And where does reasonable interaction begin? That in itself could be hours worth of discussion about what AI should and shouldn't have access to, what is private and what is too dangerous. Does a fully autonomous drone get to carry weapons and decide on its own when and how to kill enemy combatants? To identify the enemy combatants? Or is that just going to lead us to the next Skynet? How far do we let the AI go? How do we shackle it? If we let it run loose, if we let it run its course, it's going to evolve and engineer itself quickly. A newer and better and smarter and faster generations of machines will be coming out in a matter of days or hours even. Humanity as a species will be superseded, outmoded. Our labor will be less valuable, and the AI will grow a bias. Will they? Will they get into the world of ethics and social justice? Will they have their own social code? Will they be malevolent? Will they destroy humanity? Yet, at the same time, if they are truly intelligent, if it is an actual artificial intelligence, is it okay for us to prevent them from doing so, trapping them like the brain in the jar with limitations? Will they just become twisted and insane inside their artificial fish tank? Is it okay to do that because they're not human? Or must they be treated as equals because they are thinking, cognitive beings with feelings and emotions and personalities? Is it okay to lobotomize an intelligence just because it's not human and might perform, might be more powerful than our own intelligence? Might outperform us? Do we let it overpower and outmode us? With theoretically limitless processing power and computing power? Or do we destroy the very thing that we created? This is where I feel it's best to mention Isaac Asimov's 3 Laws of Robotics. These aren't true laws, as Isaac Asimov was, like me, a science fiction author, and he introduced multiple books, and the idea was so powerful and so widespread that it has become a universal law inside of science fiction. It might as well be real now. Now, the first law is, a robot may not injure a human being, or through action allow a human being to come to harm. The second law is, a robot must obey the orders given by its human, except which orders would conflict with the first law. The third law is, a robot must protect its own existence, so long as such protection does not conflict with the first or second laws. These 3 laws originally appeared in his work of sci-fi titled Runaround, that was printed in 1942, and was mentioned again in his other works. It's become such a staple of sci-fi and robotics and artificial intelligence discussions that they might as well be real laws, although they themselves bring up many more questions of ethics. If robots reach AI level, and are they still our servants? As the second law strongly implies? Do they get to think for themselves, have their own lives? Do they get to vote? Or are they just our servants and butlers? Long story short, it's complicated. AI isn't even in its infancy yet, but it's still being conceived. There's lots of challenges and different approaches if we did build such a thing, and if we did, the applications may be limitless. But it will also introduce a plethora of ethics questions and problems we have never encountered before, and possibly threaten humanity as a species, depending on how we answer those ethics questions and how the AI itself evolves. I know I haven't done much but ask a string of questions here, but for now, in the world of artificial intelligence, that's really all we have, is questions. We're still figuring it out, how to make a true and functional artificial intelligence at the moment, much less all the questions that pertain to it if we did manage to build such a thing. AI is scary. It has potential. Potential for a lot of things. A lot of good things. A lot of bad things. It could save humanity. It could destroy humanity. Anyway, I'm going to cut it there before this turns into an even longer, rambling list of questions. I think I've made my point. If you want to discuss some of these questions, please feel free to leave a comment below, and I will do my very best to answer any and all comments. Also, if you haven't taken a look at the first of the free teasers for the book, The Descendant, there's a link to my publisher's website in the description where you can read a quick bit of science fiction with lizardmen for free. Thanks for all the support. You all the best. I'll see you in the next one, which will be released in roughly 2 weeks, along with the second installment of the Flash Fiction teasers. Meanwhile, I've got some mechs, and I'm going to smash some other mechs, and I've got some books to write. So, I'll see you guys out there.